Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni to take over Star Wars movies. This according to Notorious Disney insider WDW Pro over at thatparkplace.com. Information that we have discussed on this channel numerous times at length over the past several months, discussed on other channels like the Pop Culture Breakdown over on Overlord DVD Doomcock's channel, on Midnight's Edge. Well, we've got some new stuff coming today. And of course, there's only one person I could think of to bring in to have this conversation. My good friend, notorious Hollywood insider, screenwriter, and legal mind, Kamran Pasha. We're about to get into this. Don't miss it. Stick around. Here we go. Renegade Online. Well, I hope everybody is doing well. Probably by the time this video drops, it will be Thursday morning, December 2nd, but we're recording this the night of Wednesday, December 1st. If any new information has broken since this point, sorry, can't catch up on it. We'll catch it in a later video. But great to see everybody out there. Hope everyone is having a wonderful day. It's a good day here on Valliant Renegade once again. And if you're like one of the 65% of the folks watching these videos right now that have not yet subscribed, well, I invite you to do that right now. Please hit that subscribe button, that like button, that notification bell. Do share this video out. And as always, please leave a comment before you head out today. Let me know your thoughts on all of this information about Star Wars, about Kathleen Kennedy, whatever the case may be. But please do watch the video all the way through. There's going to be a lot of information jammed in here, a lot of great information. Because, of course, on this channel, our mantra is that we put Hollywood through the business and financial lens. That is what we do here. That is what we always try to do here, at least. Of course, there is always a little bit of pop culture commentary mixed in here and there, but we really want to get to the business nitty-gritty. So let's talk about this before Kamran comes on. Let me set this up. We're going to get to Kamran in just a few minutes. Over the last several months, since I've been on YouTube, about 10 months now, but particularly the last few months, of course, the rumor mills have swirled one way and the other. Would Kathy stay? Would Kathy go? When you look back from a business and financial perspective at her tenure as the Lucasfilm president, her tutelage, her custodianship over Star Wars, it hasn't been that good. The analysts projected one thing for the Star Wars sequel trilogy, and then another thing happened where they consistently declined from the first to the second to the third movie. It's really been a big issue. Obviously, the fan base has been torn in two. People did not appreciate what happened to Han Solo, to Luke Skywalker, to a lot of the characters, and I totally understand that. I agree with all of it. I thought it was all garbage. So we have to ask ourselves, how would somebody like Kathleen Kennedy still be sitting around at Lucasfilm at this point? Well, there was two schools of thought. She would stay, she would go. I was at the school of thought that said the business metrics suggest that she should go. Because a studio head that consistently produces a trend line of losing money when it comes to merchandising, when it comes to movies, when it comes to, fill in the blank, nothing was going in the right direction for Kathy. Of course, she's been around in Hollywood for decades, and it's kind of hard to get rid of somebody like that. But what I also said, as people were calling for her to be frog marched out and publicly humiliated for what she did to Star Wars, I said, look, folks, that's never going to happen. That's not how it works at this level, especially with somebody like Kathleen Kennedy, her husband, Frank Marshall. These are Hollywood animals that have been around for many decades. It's just not going to happen. She's going to get a golden parachute package, a nice big fat paycheck to walk away quietly. We just didn't know what it would look like. So, of course, we had me and a lot of others saying that Kathleen Kennedy, the business metrics would suggest that she would go. And there was a few others in the last couple of months suggesting, you know what, she's probably going to be sticking around. I don't think she's going anywhere. Well, I think both sides of the equation were right and wrong differently. So she's staying at this point as far as we know. I was wrong about that. But for the people that said she would stay and continue to run Star Wars, well, it appears they were wrong about that. We've had so much news in the last couple of weeks, the last month, 2 months, about all of her projects basically being delayed, canceled, shanked. We've got the Rian Johnson trilogy, which I said would never go anywhere. The allegedly Leslie Headland-led Acolyte that was based on a failed book and comic series, The High Republic. That's not going anywhere at this point. We've got the Patty Jenkins movie that was rumored to be happening, Rogue Squadron. Well, that was officially announced in that case about a year ago. That's going nowhere. Call it creative differences or whatever you want. It really doesn't matter. It's not going anywhere. So if you're telling me a Hollywood studio head can't seem to get a single picture put into production in the last 5 years since The Rise of Palpatine began production, well, that tells me you're a failed studio head. So why then is she still there? Well, it appears that's the golden parachute package. And again, we have more confirmation today from WDW Pro. The rumor, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni to take over the Star Wars movies. Not just the Mandoverse, not the stuff that's actually been selling merchandise since Disney scrapped all the sequel trilogy merch a couple of years ago now and replaced it with original trilogy and Mandoverse stuff. No. Jon and Dave are now taking over the movies. The movies. So all the talk about Taika Waititi, all the talk about Kevin Feige and Michael Waldron and all this stuff, you can pretty much put that out into the ether along with Rogue Squadron, the Acolyte, and the Rian Johnson trilogy. We have no idea at this point what's happening, but one thing that we do know is that Kathleen Kennedy does not seem to have any control over Star Wars anymore. There seems to be absolutely zero evidence to support that she does. Getting her name as an executive producer on these films and these TV shows is merely a matter of right based on the Producers Guild as a head of a studio. It doesn't mean anything. It's about the same thing as saying Steven Spielberg and George Lucas will be producers on the Indiana Jones 5 movie. They are such because Disney needs their names on there, and they're going to pay them to put their names on there, and the fact that Indiana Jones was their guy. But it doesn't mean they have much involvement in the film. But we're going to talk about this. And to do that, of course, I'm bringing in my good friend Kamran Pasha. So let's get into it. So welcome back, folks. Here we are once again with Kamran Pasha. You folks out there seem to love these videos when I bring Kamran on. This channel has been growing like a weed, thanks in good part to these videos I'm doing with Kamran. Everybody seems to enjoy this business analysis of Disney, of Marvel, of Star Wars. As much as this channel has been growing, Kamran, you have a Patreon channel that has been growing like an azalea bush down here in Louisiana in the middle of summer, which is to say it's unstoppable. So it's been doing well. And again, for those of you out there who wonder where these conversations begin between Kamran and I, it's usually on Patreon.
And they began again today off of several things on Patreon today. So yeah,
they did. There's been a lot going on, in the financial world this week. Obviously we have news coming out that's giving things jitters. It's affecting a lot of companies, especially those like Disney, who would suffer quite a bit from another lockdown, although that's way off in the ether at this point. Hopefully that won't happen again. I don't think it will.
I don't think it will. I think that if I may be as blunt as to present an opinion, I think we've reached the boy has cried wolf stage of the journey. I think so. I think everyone is pretty much okay. Thank you very much for the new variant. Let's keep moving.
Omicron, Data, Epsilon, Theta, Gamma, Omega.
But not G.
Whatever it is.
But not G. But G was overlooked. G.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to bring attention to that letter. ZI. You don't want to. You don't want to bring attention to that one.
No, I know. Well, Kamran, so in the intro, we kind of set things up, and this is more centered around this whole That Park Place article from WDW Pro, who has passed along a lot of information over the months and years, especially regarding Disney and Lucasfilm. He now has his own website at thatparkplace.com for those of you out there that want to check him out. Of course, he's been a good friend of our mutual friends like Doomcock and Midnight's Edge and people like that. So we're talking about this thing now where this has really played into much of what we've discussed, you and I, in the last several months regarding the whole Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni thing. What's going on at Lucasfilm with Kathleen Kennedy? Would she stay or would she go? We thought she would go. A lot of other people thought she would stay. But it seems like we've actually, both rumors are correct.
It's Schrodinger's cat. It's Kennedy's cat. Both are true. Both are true at the same time.
They really are.
Magic. That's the magic. She's both there and not there. It's pure quantum physics magic.
Yeah, it really is, because when you look at this, you and I have said, and we have agreed wholeheartedly on this matter, Kathy was never going to get embarrassed and fired and sent out the door. She would always be given high accolades, a giant freaking golden parachute, a big paycheck from Disney. We just didn't know what form it would take. Well, it seems at this point that there's enough actual data on the table that we can make a relatively educated guess and see that the golden parachute is in fact her keeping her title, but with seemingly zero power over the single, by far, largest IP that her studio has control over, which is just, it's an incredible contradiction of terms, but here we are.
But and I believe this. I believe Miss Kennedy has always, in her heart of hearts, wanted this outcome from the moment she signed her contract with Lucasfilm and George Lucas, even before Disney, which is to have all the prestige and the fame and the association with Lucasfilm and with Star Wars without having to do any of this stuff that she's not good at.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I don't think she wants to do the work. And even before all of the rumor mill started, there were rumors that Kathy was, she was kind of an absentee landlord. She was never really physically at Lucasfilm. It was always being run by other people. After especially the sequel trilogy came and went to financial disdain for Disney, if we can be so bold. But she moved on and her attention focused elsewhere. And especially now she seems to be zeroed in on Indy 5, which has been delayed now from the point we're at. 18 months when it was supposed to be next summer, delayed 12 months past that. And then we've had the news that we discussed previously about Rogue Squadron. The Acolyte is a turkey. The Rian Johnson trilogy that was never going to happen. All this stuff, like we said last time we talked, a studio head running Lucasfilm who has not been able to take a single project into even pre-production in over 5 years at this point. Since the Rise of Palpatine went into production. It's amazing.
That's not normal. That, by the way, people, I have a good friend of mine who's a big producer who's a big defender of Kathleen Kennedy. He's a defender of the club. He feels an automatic knee-jerk defense of the club because I think he wants to be part of it, right? And he's up and coming, right? He's going there. So he doesn't want to ever criticize any of those people. So I remember how many conversations I've had with him where every incompetent buffoonery I've seen from Miss Kennedy has been excused. When she reshoots Solo, essentially 80% of Solo, I'm like, this isn't normal. This isn't, a normal producer.
And not just Solo.
Normal producer looks at dailies daily. That's why they're called dailies. You get the original uncut footage from the set, and a producer's job is to look at it and go, I don't like this. I remember the very first when I was on Twilight Zone, my very first job on Twilight Zone, staff writer, working with Ira Stephen Bear from Deep Space Nine and Forrest Whitaker, and we got our very first dailies. We had been writing for months, and finally it was in production in Vancouver, and we got through the old primitive internet system of the time. We got our dailies delivered to us from Vancouver, and we're all sitting around the writers' room excited to watch the very first episodes of our words, and we're looking at it, and I'm staring at the screen, and there's just silence, and we're watching the dailies, and there's just silence, and finally I'm like the little child from The Emperor Has No Clothes, and finally I go, because I don't have any experience, I'm a staff writer, I've been in the job for 3 months, right? I go, guys, am I crazy or does this suck? Is this terrible, right? And then everyone's, they're all, when the little boy says The Emperor Has No Clothes, everyone's like, oh my God, they're pulling their hair out. They're like, this footage is horrible. What is the director doing? Is he out of their mind? And so then there's lots of phone calls. The showrunner's on the phone screaming at Vancouver, what's going on there? Do we need to send people up right now? Don't you know how to film a show? So that's a daily. That was the next day, right? And even I'm staff writer watching and going, this isn't working. And guess what? We started fixing it the next day. So to say that you are 8 months or however many months it was, but 80% into the production of Solo and perhaps $100 million or more spent into it, and then going, well, this is the movie I want. Didn't you know that on the first dailies, or maybe the first week, or the second week, or the third week, or the fourth week?
Did you look at the script?
Yeah, you weren't looking at them until someone in the production, apparently the screenwriter, who didn't like the fact that the directors were off ad-libbing the whole movie, right? He's like, they're not doing my script. She's like, what? They're not doing your script? Really? She hadn't been looking at any of the daily. She has no idea. I don't think she's read the script. And so it's just, so I said this to my friend. I was like, this isn't normal. A producer, he's like, well, you, Cameron, you haven't run $100 million production, Cameron. You don't understand the level of responsibility it takes. Sometimes you have to make decisions and major changes later in the process. I'm like, this isn't later in the process. This is the end of the process. How can you restart all over and bring a new director and reshoot the whole damn thing? I was like, this isn't normal. But the defenders of the club will rationalize it. But the reality is nothing that has happened at Lucasfilm is normal business by even crazy Hollywood standards. It's not professional. Nothing has been professional. It made no sense because Miss Kennedy never wanted to do this job. Everything she's done has been a reaction. Oh, I'm getting these angry phone calls from people that something's wrong with Solo. I better get into it now. It's been filming for 6 months. I had no idea, right? And so that's not normal behavior of a producer or a studio head. That's just not. Right.
Yeah.
And so that has been tolerated for 6-7 years. And there's only so much you can tolerate before they give what I call the Cameron parachute. The one I got when I was fired from Disney. Here's your paycheck. Go home. Don't come back. And you keep getting your paychecks and keep your mouth shut.
There you go. That's it. At the end of the day, and people, I know out there, they want to be cynical about everything Hollywood, which I completely understand and I respect. And there is a lot to be cynical about. There's no doubt. But at the end of the day, Hollywood is still a business. Mm-hmm. It really is. It still has to make money. And while they may be in a hole right now in terms of their experimenting with all the, let's just call it the social justice stuff, and that they're cramming into every IP out there, everything they put out, where they're denigrating old characters, replacing them with new characters, and saying, hey, look at this. Look how diverse and representative this is. And it's like, nobody cares. We just want good movies. We want good stories. I think that, as you have said many times, and I agree with you, that pendulum is starting to swing. It's gone so far in one direction that it has to come back. Gravity is going to pull it back center, at some point. And I think we're starting to see signs of that.
Well, more than signs. We've seen some victories. Yeah. Ghostbusters Afterlife is a victory. It's a victory for storytelling. It's a victory for the fans. It's a victory for honoring legacies, right? And I was saying that, who I'm sure watched Ghostbusters Afterlife that weekend when it premiered? Bob Chapek. I'm sure he maybe took his kids out and watched it and goes, the hell is this? Why didn't we do this in Star Wars? What is this? This would have worked in Star Wars. We could have made a whole movie about a bunch of new people on a planet doing this thing, whatever, and Rey, this, that. And at the end of the movie, you bring the three back together to be heroic with the other kids. That would have been it. Why didn't we do that?
Well,
having that conversation.
I agree with you. And look, I've said before, and you and I have had this conversation ourselves. I think, honestly, to tie into that, that's the second movie Chapek has done that with this year. The second Sony movie. And the first one was Venom. Yep. And he's got to be looking at this, like I've talked about, how is it that Sony Pictures are making these films with, in the case of Venom, a very similar or at least comparable level of post-production CGI to something like Shang-Chi or the Eternals? They're in those veins. They might have had a little more here and there, but to say that they made Venom for $105 to $110 million, and that Kevin Feige is still allocating almost double that, $200 million, for every Marvel film that's been coming out. And then he goes and sees Ghostbusters. I'm like, how the shit are they making this for $75 million? And we're spending $150 million to make Encanto. What's going on?
Entertaining. At $75 million, there's special effects, there's some stuff, there's some scary ghosts, it's all that, but it's wildly entertaining.
Yes. It's when you stick a good story with it, take the budget aside, as long as it's a good story that audiences gravitate to, even if not initially, that it develops word of mouth, like we saw with Ghostbusters that developed some amazing legs. A 40% drop into the second weekend, which is awesome for any movie.
Which is what I expected. I expected it would be something like that because we're used to hearing 60% drop. We're used to hearing stuff like that.
Every Marvel movie this year has been a 62% drop, first to second weekend.
Yeah,
62. And they haven't started out near enough. And we're talking about Marvel movies that had almost 3 times the budget of Ghostbusters. And that's the problem. And, so when you look across the board of what's going on at Disney, and as we move into the whole Kathleen Kennedy situation, and I know Disney has had some corporate changes we're going to talk about as well a little bit, or at least in terms of the board. But, it just, I've been saying for months, there's going to come a reckoning. And it may not happen tomorrow or next week or next month, but there is a reckoning coming. And they've got to be looking at this, and they're looking at their peer groups out there in Hollywood and wondering, how is it that they're turning out these same products, or these, not same, but let's say these similar products, these comparable
these
products.
Are big franchises based on decades old material that had older fan bases, right? They are comparable in that respect.
Yeah, and they're turning these things out for a fraction of the cost of what Disney is allocating. And Disney is not turning out the box office the same way. I mean, Venom had globally a better box office than Shang-Chi. Venom also had a substantially lower budget than Shang-Chi. And that's why we've talked about, Venom made money. Shang-Chi didn't, and we'll get the official deadline numbers probably sometime January, February, because Deadline does a great job of putting out the best and the worst of the box office of a given year. Now, they didn't do one in 2020. They had a fabulous one in 2019 because 2019 was a free-for-all when it came to the box office stuff. And they do the very analytical financial breakdowns of each and every movie in the top 10 and the worst 10. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. And I think
hopefully they will continue that after the hiccup of the last year.
Yeah, I hope to see one for 2021. I think they should do it. I think it'd be a fascinating year to update, especially rental agreements with theaters, to see what they can find out, because I know they haven't been as good this year as they have in the past because of the way these studios are releasing this. But
which brings into, remember when Star Wars was being pushed out, especially Last Jedi, they were strong arming. Disney was strong arming the theaters. You're going to give us 70% of the first weekend, right?
Even more than that, I heard.
Yeah, it was pretty high. I mean, they were using their leverage, especially because I think they knew TLJ was a turkey and they need to get their money up front. They knew that, right? And so, I don't know that they got the leverage to do that anymore.
I don't think they do. And especially when you look at, if I'm AMC, especially AMC, after the stock price run that they had due to the quote unquote retail investors, like people from Reddit, that drove the stock price up way higher than it had any business being. And it's still sitting up there. I mean, they were able to liquidate a bunch of treasury shares,
which I think is great.
And raise a buttload of cash.
Yeah.
So AMC is looking at this, Cinemark, Regal, the same thing. And they know long-term, they can't shoot themselves in the foot short-term and shoot themselves in the foot, long-term to get a short-term gain.
Yeah.
And when you have movie studios like Warner Brothers coming in and saying, well, here's fill in the blank, Suicide Squad, Dune, whatever, and we're going to release it day and date on HBO Max. In 2019, a theater would have said, go pound sand. They wouldn't even let them in the door. That's a fact. And then you have studios like Disney saying, okay, well, we'll give it to you, but only for a 30 or 45-day exclusive window, but then it's going to immediately drop for free on Disney Plus on our streaming service. Then you have Sony, who's coming in with Venom, who's coming in with Spider-Man No Way Home, who's coming in with a slate of pretty popular movies this year, Ghostbusters Afterlife. And they're coming to the AMC and Cinemark and Regal theaters, and they're saying, you know what? We're going to give you a traditional theatrical run. We don't have a streaming service. We're not going to drop it out there 30 days after it's in your theater. What will you give us? Guess who's getting the best deals? Guess who's getting the best revenue sharing and rental agreements right now? It's studios like Sony. Disney ain't getting those deals. And especially when their movies like The Eternals, things like that are not turning out the box office the way that normal MCU movies historically would have done. And you can claim it's this or that, but when you have movies like Venom that turn out almost the exact same domestic box office as its predecessor, Quiet Place Part 2 turning out pretty much the same domestic box office as its predecessor.
During a pandemic.
The Conjuring Part 8, whatever the hell it was, the 8th movie in the Conjuring series, turning out as much or pretty much as much as its predecessor did pre-pandemic. That argument to me is...
Well, but the other thing you've revealed here is that there is, for those of us that love movies, the existence of a streaming service in the corporation creates a problem for the quality of the movie. where Sony is now going to, this is a feedback loop for Sony. They're going to get the best theatrical situation. They're going to get the best theatrical income, and they're going to put that into making better movies. And it's going to get a bigger and bigger circle because they don't have to service a streaming outlet. They have a pure film agenda. And what is that going to mean? I haven't even thought about it, but just came to me as you were talking. Does that mean in the future, are some of these companies going to attempt to create a new situation or some kind of a Chinese wall between their streaming service and the feature things? Are streaming only going to have their leftovers after a longer period? It may change the dynamics of things when people keep seeing Sony making better and better movies quality-wise and economic-wise because they're not saddled with servicing this.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it because companies like Sony, I think they recognized wisely early on is that instead of us trying to sink tens of billions of dollars of capital to establish a proprietary streaming service, we're going to make more money more consistently by simply making good movies and then doing the traditional route of licensing them out post-theatrical exhibition to Netflix or Showtime or HBO or Stars or fill in the blank. And it's like, yeah, we're going to keep doing that. Sony has made no maneuvers towards a proprietary streaming service.
And nor should they, based on what they've just experienced.
Nor should they. Yeah, I think it'd be foolish. I mean, Disney, as it stands right now, Disney Plus is still operating, to anybody's surprise out there. Disney is still fiscally operating at a loss. They're not making money on Disney Plus yet. That was a reaffirmed statement in their last financial report. Mm-hmm. That's done deal. That's it. That's fact. Now, that's not to say that long term, and of course, this is what Disney is looking at. They're not looking at the first 2 or 3 years. They're looking at a long-term thing. But it stands right now, with what they're producing, and especially compared to other studios, the budgets that they allocate to these productions are so out of whack with so many other studios when you compare the same types of films. I think it's become an issue for them. And again, this is one of those things that we've talked about. I've talked about, you've talked about, Midnight's Edge, everybody's talked about. I think this is something that Disney is really going to try to, especially Bob Chapek, is going to try to rein in and get under control and asking himself, again, why are we spending this much when everybody else is only spending this and getting the same box office or more? And what are we doing?
And why are we spending this much on untested projects like Shang-Chi, on the Eternals?
On the Eternals especially, yeah.
Why are we testing why are we spending this kind of money on brands that have not proven themselves to have a customer base? It doesn't make rational sense. Yeah,
and they're not generating ancillary revenues like from merchandising or anything else. I mean, we've joked about it for months. I mean, the toys for Shang-Chi and the Eternals hit the clearance racks before the movies even came out. And that's it. I mean, there's no bunch of kids clamoring for Eternals and Shang-Chi toys for Christmas, folks. I mean, do you see any Eternals and Shang-Chi Lego sets out there? They're not there. You know what the big thing right now for Lego and Nerf guns and all that? I went to Target yesterday, took Renegade Jr. It's all either classic Star Wars, Mandoverse, Jon Favreau Star Wars, and Roblox. Roblox apparently has put out a huge slate of toys, which is a massive online multiplayer video game system that 10 and 15-year-olds play.
And you know what's coming next? Power proton pack guns, that are going to be Ghostbusters. My 5-year-old
The Ghostbusters toys are picking up again.
Already demanding his proton pack. My 5-year-old nephew wants his proton pack right now, right?
Yep. It's amazing to watch. And speaking of, the old classic Star Wars toys, so let's kind of turn the conversation into that part, because we set this up with Disney. Disney obviously has a lot going on. They have a lot of issues that I think Chapek is going to spend the next couple of years trying to address. One of them obviously is Star Wars. One of them is Kathleen Kennedy. So we get this news today filtering into all this. And this was a great conversation up to this point to set this up, to put this all into perspective. Here we got Star Wars, which was, I think, the first big warning sign, even though I don't think Iger necessarily recognized it as it was happening. I think Chapek definitely did. But Star Wars was a big warning sign between 2015 and 2019 with that sequel trilogy that, oh, this is not working the way we thought it would.
Yeah.
And here we are with Kathleen Kennedy. Ostensibly at this point, we have to assume, yep, she's still there. That's what we can see. She's still the president and head honcho of Lucasfilm. However, that comes with a caveat. And it seems like that caveat is a golden parachute package that now, according to WDW Pro, and that other sources like Grace Randolph and things like that have picked up, for whatever you think of Grace Randolph, I don't care. If you love her, you hate her, that's fine. There's nothing against Grace Randolph one way or the other. But she is a big YouTube personality. She is a big, rumor leaker and stuff like that.
And she's got the normies for the audience, which WDW.
No, she is not. She is not. Yeah, she's definitely not a fandom menace person.
She's a normies person. Her audience is normies. Mm-hmm. And if you were Bob Chapek and you needed to leak out positive information, especially after listening to people grumbling for a week about, over Thanksgiving weekend, having to listen to this crap about people saying, Bob Chapek guy screwed us all. You gave her a 3-year contract. What would you do? Would you leak it out you would leak it out to the fan sites like theparkplace.com. You would do that. But if you wanted people like my brother-in-law, who's a normie, who doesn't read any of that stuff, if you want him to know about it, you give it to Grace Randolph.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think this is one of these things that are starting to come around to where we're seeing, a lot of the writing on the wall that we've talked about for months. Mm-hmm. So here we are, and that Park Place is now talking about that John and Dave have indeed been given control by someone of the Star Wars movies. And, unless you want to smash your head into a concrete wall and argue this point, I seriously doubt it was Kathleen Kennedy that gave them this power. I mean, again, this goes back to, Dave Filoni, that was named as an executive creative director over all of Lucasfilm, not like executive creative director like Rob Bredow and some of these guys over ILM, or Doug Chang over the Star Wars art department, the guy who creates the planets and the ships and the artwork, basically the world building of Star Wars. No. Dave Filoni is like third in line or in the organizational chart on the website for Lucasfilm, executive creative director over all of it. And that wasn't announced, right? We found out about that, 8 months later by accident. It just kind of leaked out. Everybody's like, wait, the website changed. What the hell just happened? Mm-hmm. So all this stuff has just been dribbling in little tiny sneaky bits at a time. Yeah. And here we are at this point, and now we're getting this news that effectively, as far as Star Wars goes, Kathy's out.
Yeah. She's not even in charge of the movies anymore, which fits in with what we know, which is all the movies she had been developing were vanished.
Yeah.
Rogue Squadron vanished. The fake Rian Johnson trilogy has vanished. Mm-hmm. Right. Anything she was talking about has vanished. And I would suggest
the Benioff and Weiss one, the Game of Thrones guys.
Those two have vanished. Nobody's talking about either of them. I mean, they've disappeared. Yeah. I mean, Rian Johnson.
Everything she has touched has just disappeared. And I mean, that does not suggest to me an all powerful studio head.
Yeah, I mean, it's not normal. Nothing around Miss Kennedy's tenure has been normal on any level. Her power has not been normal, and her lack of power has not been normal. Nothing has been normal, right? It's just this bizarro. She's like a vortex of alternative reality floating through this hollow. I mean, it's strange stuff, but we're dealing with that strange stuff, and it all makes sense based. Again, all you can do is when you hear a rumor and a report, you have to look at context. So the two contexts I look at here. One, this is multiple people reporting it on the same day. So that suggests this is an organized rumor put out by powerful people, and it was targeted. One, get the fan sites through WDW Pro, who is a known leaker of important inside information, for the fans. And then you hit the normies with a Grace Randolph, who's just, a voice for them. And then that's going to spread it wide, and suddenly everyone is excited about this. And suddenly the conversation has changed from, why did you not fire Kathleen Kennedy, to, oh my God, let's see this new cinematic universe. I want to see what Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni have planned. If it's not going to be any of this stuff, what's it going to be? They obviously have some plan. You don't just get that authority without having a plan. They got something they want to do. And so let's see what that is.
Well, yeah, when you look at all the data points, and this is the bottom line, like you and I have talked about before, when, you know, one side would leak this, another side would leak this, and you see this journalistic war, I guess, for lack of better words, you know, one side going after the other. And this seems like the same thing, is that we had leak about, or story, not even just leaks, but story about, like you said, this gets delayed, this gets canceled, this is going, that's going, everybody scratching their heads. Well, what the hell's going on with Star Wars apart from the Favreau verse? The stuff we know, like Book of Boba Fett, like the Ahsoka Tano show,
all
like
TV
Obi-Wan,
shows. All
right,
TV
and
shows,
all things that are basically run by either Favreau or his stand-ins, you know, Favreau or his Star Wars students, right? Like Deborah Chow.
Yeah.
And you have to wonder, okay, what's going on? And then we get okay, well, Kathy has been renewed, her contract has been extended. And whether it's 3 years or 6 months, I take the duration
Kamran
of that
Pasha payoff, as I like to call it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we don't know exactly. I mean, it could be another 3 years. It could be 6 months. I think the duration is a little bit up in the air. But the fact that she's still there seems to be solidified at this point. However, that was after, again, all this stuff about this and that is getting canceled. But then, what, a week, 2 weeks after the leaks came out about Kathy being, you know, quietly renewed, 2 or 3 weeks, or excuse me, 1 or 2 weeks after Frank Marshall, her husband, retweets a retweet of a tweet, whatever the hell he did, with no comment on Twitter, saying that Kathy had been renewed. Now these leaks are coming out. So it seems like Kathy lets this go that she probably wasn't supposed to let go. And then an answer comes on the other side. Okay. All right. Well, you let that one out. I'm going to drop this one. Yeah, she's still here, but she ain't doing shit. She doesn't have any power.
Which is what I predicted would happen. I mean, which is what I predicted, because I didn't think that Bob Chapek wanted that Frank Marshall retweet thingy to spread that stuff, right? That's how it spread. Otherwise, no one would pay any attention to it. No one really knew that story. And so he didn't want that. I'm sure that really irritated the hell out of him, especially coming off just a few days after this earnings call and a massive stock drop in the stock price. He didn't want this garbage. So he's like, oh, you're going to do this? You're going to do this? All right, guess what? I predicted this 2 weeks ago. I said, okay, he's going to retaliate. He's going to put out something that's not going to make her look good. And oh, guess what? She's had all the movies taken away from her. And now you get the normies. You get Grace Randolph, Queen of the Normies, saying it. You know, that's a retaliation.
Yeah, and that's what I think it is. I think it was tit for tat. You know, all the news comes out. I think the Indy 5 is what precipitated this. I think that's what started it. When Alan Bergman or Bob Chapek or whoever made the call to shelve Indy 5 for an additional year for very questionable reasons. I know that there was this whole notion that, well, the post-production was going to take way longer than we thought it would because of all the CGI we're going to have to do. Basically, Harrison Ford's face is going to be faked through most of the film.
You could do that. So kids can do that with deepfake technology for $5.
Yeah, I mean, they hired Shamook, for God's sake, off of YouTube to do exactly this. He was hired to deep fake Harrison Ford. Let's be honest. That's why he's there, because he did such an amazing job on YouTube of doing it with Solo and stuff that they were like, we got to get this guy, which is great. Good for him. I think the guy's super talented. And that may be partially true, but I think that was the first thing. And then all the other news coming out about Rogue Squadron, this and that. And then it was like, well, Kathy decided at some point, or Frank might have decided, well, we got to put something else out there. We got to put something else that rosies this picture up. So they leak out this, well, she's still there. She's not going anywhere. She still has the title. And then Chapek decides, aight, bitch, blap, you know, here you go. You don't have any power over Star Wars. I mean, I don't.
And none of this would have happened had they just kept it strategically ambiguous, which I believe Chapek's plan was. No,
I
don't
agree.
ask, don't tell. We don't know what's happening with Kathleen Kennedy. That way I don't humiliate you that you got no power. Oh, you want to reveal that I made a deal with you? Now I'm going to reveal what that deal was. You got no power, lady. You took away the strategic ambiguity. You ain't going to like when the clouds of ambiguity are gone.
Yeah, I thought it was very strange, this year, Disney Plus Day. I found it very odd. Now, last year in 2020, it was Disney Investor Day, and it would happen in December. And they did this, whatever it was, hour and a half, 2-hour video that they live streamed, pre-recorded, but it was live streamed. I mean, it went out, at the same time. And, you had all the studio heads get out there on a live stream and talk about, here's what's coming. Here's what's coming from Marvel, from FX, from Hulu, from Disney Animation Studios, and from Lucasfilm. And then this year we got this big celebratory 2-year celebration of Disney Plus. And it was literally nothing. They did nothing. They basically just released it as a press release. Here's a list of stuff.
I mean, it just rambling thing with no.
It struck me as very odd.
Yeah,
and that was my first thought. It's like, what didn't they want to? Why didn't they want to do another big, watch this live event? I mean, that's what all these big companies are doing these days. Hell, we were talking about Roblox earlier. I watched Roblox at their investor meeting talking about all the new 5-hour live stream, talking about all the new tech, talking about all the new games and all this kind of stuff. I mean, this is what companies do now. And Disney was like, we're so excited about the 2nd year anniversary of Disney Plus. Here's a press release with 20 shows. It seemed a little lackluster and boring. So,
can I say this as well? As from old strategic Hollywood, what was it called? It's smoke and mirrors. Yeah. When you want someone to not notice something, you put out a long rambling email where it's buried in paragraph 7. Right? I've done it. Right? When you're like, I hope they don't notice this is happening, so I'm gonna give this long blah blah blah, and then later when they're like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Oh, I told you. Look at that email. It's like buried, but it's there. It is there. I did tell you." Right?
Look down in the footnote and the bylines. Well, I think you and I talked about this on the last time that we streamed together. The thing that was most shocking about the Disney Plus Day announcements was that it was virtually devoid of all Star Wars content.
Yeah,
like the only thing that was mentioned in there.
Trailers, all that stuff that you would expect.
Even the Book of Boba Fett itself wasn't mentioned on the list. Like, we know it's coming out December 29th or whatever.
Yeah, so it should be on there.
Yeah, it should be on there. They had like a making of the Book of Boba Fett, but the Ahsoka show and all the other stuff that Obi-Wan wasn't scheduled on there. It was odd, and it struck me as, well, we know these shows exist. We know the principal photography is either in production right now currently, or it's completed, but it wasn't listed. And it struck me as, instead of making something obvious, like you said, like something was missing, they just left it all off.
Yeah.
They just left everything off so as not to raise questions.
You don't ask any questions. If you don't see the big red flag names, you don't ask any questions.
Yeah, because like if they listed Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan, and then you didn't see anything else, then people would have gone, well, what happened to this show? What happened to this show? What happened to this show? They left all the Star Wars stuff off so people would go, oh, well, they'll make the announcements later. I'm like, yeah, they will, but it's going to be absent some things that you're expecting. Yeah, I mean, last year they talked about the Acolyte. Where's the Acolyte? It's like I've been saying, it's dead. It's gone.
Yeah,
it was never going to happen.
And even WDW Pro suggested it would be canceled in their report today. And I said that on my Patreon a month ago. I mean, I've been saying it for a long time, but if I said, look, there's no reason to ever release this. Bob Chapek has no reason. There's no economic value to putting this thing out there. Nothing.
Well, you notice just recently they started talking about this rumor started happening about an Old Republic, either movie or Disney Plus show. And I said, I'm like, oh, that's funny, because I thought the High Republic was replacing Old Republic. Yep. So now you're telling me that the Old Republic is going to get a show. And I said, if the Acolyte happens, the only way it happens is that if it's radically altered from its original intent, which was to be basically a bookend to the High Republic failed book and comic series.
Too much effort.
So
that's too much effort for Leslie Headland, who doesn't have leverage without Kathleen Kennedy as her mentor. There's no leverage that she's got. To put that much effort into taking this thing and transforming it. I don't know that she cares to do it or understands the material enough to do it, and she certainly doesn't have the leverage to compel Disney to do it.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And I don't see that this is going anywhere. I just find it curious. There's been too much, like I said, all the information was moving in one direction to say that Kathy's reign there is pretty much done. But then you get this announcement of, well, she's still there. Her contract's been extended. So how do you make these two things match? Well, the only thing that seems to work, especially with this new information now, that the movies have even been handed over to Favreau. That this is a really exquisite retirement package for Kathy.
And it's humiliating. Ms. Kennedy should not have pushed getting the information out that she was still there, because now this is out and this is the big news, right? And even if the average normie doesn't put two and two together, at some point you begin to realize, well, what's she doing, right? And the fans
Blood and Bone or whatever her independent film is, or
the fans have put two and two together that she's out, even if some of them are still angry about her retaining a title. But today's announcement really puts that to it. And even the normies are gonna be like, I don't know. I mean, what is she doing, right? And so it was a mistake on her part. It came, in my opinion, out of a very bruised and damaged ego of having to endure fan anger for several years and being silenced by the system, being unable to retort and respond to it. And I'm sure that ate her craw for years. And finally, when she's like, I beat you guys. I got, I'm still technically there. I beat all of you. And what? Deadline's not going to report it? Variety's not going to report it? Damn it. All right, Frank, get it to this guy. And, he wrote a crappy article about me. All right, well, don't retweet that. Why don't you retweet somebody else? Tweeted that, but put a spin on it in the title. Retweet that so nobody reads the original.
He retweeted, and I'm sorry, no offense to the person who originally tweeted it, but let's be honest, he retweeted a retweet from a nobody.
Yeah.
That's why I thought that whole thing was so suspect. But I mean, here we are at this point, and you look at this and you have to understand, from a normie perspective, and you don't have to have, deep inside knowledge to figure this one out. Kathleen Kennedy was the one that came out and said, the force is female and we're not going to cater to 50-year-old white men, the previous fan base.
Times.
Yeah, she said that in the New York Times. And then, she's also the one that famously, stupidly, ignorantly said, looking in the camera, well, there really wasn't any source material. It's not like we had 800-page novels to figure out what to do. And what is Favreau doing now? He's bringing in the Thrawn trilogy.
Yeah,
I mean, this is the novels that have been around for 20 years. And I mean, it just makes her look like a dumbass.
Well, I honestly believe she didn't know about the EU. I don't think
she did either. I don't think she ever cared about
Star Wars. Any of the books. I don't think she's looked at any of the comics. I mean, when it was dismissed into Legends, probably somebody gave her a memo that's what we're doing. She's like, all right, yeah, sounds good. She had no idea what it was.
I think that was the story group. That was Pablo Hidalgo and that crew that wanted to come in. By the way, anybody heard from the story group and Pablo Hidalgo lately? What's it been, like a year and a half? Year? Yeah, they're gone.
Well, I miss my
they're as defunct as KK is in terms of any power. I mean, the story group was supposed to be the driving force for everything that Lucasfilm did, especially with Star Wars. They were supposed to be the driving force. They were going to craft the entire architecture. They were going to build out the MCU in Star Wars. Crickets.
Well, crickets. As I said before I was kicked off of Twitter, not only did you lose, I said, all you're going to lose your power in Lucasfilm, and your careers are over because no one's going to hire you after this. You're forever tainted for what you did.
You're telling me it's like, okay, yeah, your career is so great. You have the most valuable piece of intellectual property in the history of Hollywood in your hands. You had full control over it, and you broke it. I mean, what?
You created a living rock. And a ship called the Vessel. That's the best you could come up with.
Actually, Cameron, you make a good point. The entirety of Kathleen Kennedy's career at Lucasfilm can be summed up in the visual representation of Geode.
Yeah. A dead stone.
Yeah. A dead, lifeless rock. Yeah. That is it. That is what she turned Star Wars into. Yeah.
Completely unself-aware that it's not even a living character, right? So, whatever. So, but I want to actually shift because there's another element to this that came out today, and which I think is relevant because Kathleen Kennedy has been shielded for the last decade with the alleged claim of being the most powerful woman in Hollywood, right? Well, that shifted today because a woman became the chairman of Disney for the first time in history.
Yep.
And now today, starting on January 1st, Susan Arnold, who is just announced as Bob Iger's replacement as chair of Disney. And that is a massive development. There's multiple layers to that. I wrote about it in depth on my Patreon, but I want to cover it here because there is a practical element to it as well. And there's a more subtle Machiavellian element that I believe is there. The practical element is that it supports what you and I have been saying for a year now, which is that the financiers, the investors, the fund managers are attempting to take control of Disney and write it so that they stop losing money on this investment. And for those who don't know, Ms. Arnold, who is taking over as the new chairman of Disney, she comes from the Carlyle Group, which is one of the most powerful private equity investment firms in the world. And she comes directly from there. She was in the board. She represented them on the board. So she was a voice for the investors for years now, and clearly likely a Bob Chapek ally the whole time. Maybe she was the one that put him in there in the first place, right? Because it's clear that he somehow outsmarted a bunch of other people to get that job. And so clearly the investors are behind him, and she's one of the major voices of investors. And now she is the chairman of Disney. So it seems like this was almost like a coup. She's not a Hollywood person. Iger was a Hollywood person. She ain't a Hollywood person. She's even more out of Hollywood than Bob Chapek was. At least Bob Chapek was in the company dealing with the parks and dealing with toys and things that were relevant to it, right? She is a focused, ruthless financial investor who is now the chairman of Disney Corporation, right? So that is a massive, massive shift. And she's a woman. And now she's the most powerful woman in Hollywood. So I guess Kathleen Kennedy doesn't have that shield anymore.
No, you're absolutely right. And I'm glad you brought that up before we started. I've had a long day, and it's like that was one thing I just went in one ear and out the other. And that is something that I'm going to cover a little bit more in depth in the coming days when I get some time. But yeah, it's definitely, she's been around a long time. And yes, this is the first female chairman of the Walt Disney Company since its inception 96 years ago. And it's something to behold. And again, like you said, she is somebody that comes strongly from the financial background, from the business world. We can talk more about her quote unquote politics or, leanings later on, but it is something that's going to be interesting to watch because like we talked about the last time we did this video, I said, you said, one of the things that I think was still, a bit of a foot, I guess, for lack of better phraseology, on Bob Chapek's throat is Iger, who's still around through New Year's.
Yeah.
So when we see this shift happen, when we see Susan Arnold come in and officially take the reins, who has, hopefully will steer this company back into a fiscal direction it needs to be, because she does, to me, seem very much the type that is more in tune with a Bob Chapek than a Bob Iger. Bob Chapek, who has said we need to get back to a more distribution-focused strategy, versus a Bob Iger who then immediately turns around within a couple of weeks and publicly states that, boy, I hope the numbers don't get in the way of the creativity, or something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing, but it's not too far off the mark. Susan Arnold is much more of the, let's get back to distribution type.
Well, and this is part of her background, and I'm sure you're going to do a much more detailed article on her background in the future. But she used to was the CEO of Procter and Gamble, right?
Yes.
So,
yes, she was.
Yeah, and so, but she was only there for a few years, and she left, I believe, around 2007, and then she went.
It was right before she went to Carlisle. Yeah.
Right. So, but that is literally a nuts and bolts company that's out there directly consumer oriented, right? Yeah. But after she left, it went through a period of woke craziness that we saw with Gillette doing, in 2019, 12 years after she left. Gillette did this insane campaign, anti-male campaign in its razors about toxic masculinity, and here's your trans son and all this stuff. And it was just like this strange stuff that wasn't for that market. There are markets that are interested in that.
I actually stopped buying Gillette razors with those commercials. And then Harry's did the same thing, and I stopped buying Harry's.
You were not alone, because at the end of 2019, it registered an $8 billion loss. Procter & Gamble had to write down $8 billion from Gillette. $8 billion, right? And now that I watch watching my Discovery Plus all the time, and there's commercials on my Discovery Plus, and now I'm seeing Gillette ads, and they're all macho men, right?
They went back to their roots because that's who was buying their damn products.
These are MMA fighters, right? These are men. I'm like, I got to go work out after watching this commercial. I got to get moving, right? And so they went back to that. Now, she watched, I'm sure, with quite a bit of embarrassment from the sidelines that a company that she ran lost $8 billion after she left with some stupid advertising executive on Madison Avenue, came up with a dumb plan, and they all went with it. She saw that, and that's really embarrassing. What associations that I'm involved with after I've left and I've seen them mismanaged, I get embarrassed because I was proud of the work that I did on those groups, right? And so you can be aware that she has been watching that. Not just what's happening at Disney as a board member she's been watching, but she saw her own baby being ruined by fools after she left. So I don't think she's going to be interested in Bob Iger's vision of, we need creativity like those Gillette ads. She's like, we need to satisfy the market.
Right. And that's just it. And there's nothing, just so everybody out there understands, nothing wrong with creativity, nothing wrong with letting the artists create and do what they want to do. But it has to be guided by what can sell. And that's the big difference. That's the kind of Chapek mentality that Disney just so desperately needs at this point after the last 10 years of being on a spending spree. It
was like a drunk sailor. Disney was like a drunk sailor.
Buying up Fox and Marvel and Lucasfilm and all this, which, okay, if you and look, obviously the Marvel purchase was great for Disney. Regardless of what Marvel is churning out right now, which is crap, the 10 years prior to this have been a huge boon for Disney. I mean, there's no doubting that. Now, where it goes from here is another question, and it seems like it's moving in the wrong direction. Star Wars, on the other hand, okay, great purchase, but they had the wrong person in charge of it, which we're having this conversation on tonight. Fox is the same thing. Fox says we really have yet to see what Disney can do with this because that's been even more recent. That was 2018, 19, I believe. And you got to remember, folks out there watching, that anytime a merger like this happens, anytime one company's taking over another, it takes a few years to get that moving.
Yeah, especially when part of the company that's taking you over is in its own chaos, where they can't figure themselves out. How are they going to figure you out? Right.
And the big thing from the Fox purchase, and this is what Disney really wanted out of this. This was the moneymaker. And just as a reminder to everybody, remember, Disney is a huge, multifaceted corporation. They are not going to rise and fall based on the MCU. They're not going to rise and fall based on Star Wars. They rise and fall based on the success of the parks and the merchandise revenue. And then when it comes to linear television programming, especially linear television programming, meaning not Disney Plus, like you turn on your cable channels and watch this. Disney owns sports. And that's one of the reasons why they bought Fox, is because apart from their massive sports holdings with ESPN and ABC networks, which they own outright, Fox brought in a lot more. Yeah. So, that is Disney's bread and butter more than anything. So hopefully they will get that house in order in terms of the other areas where you've got things like, again, Lucasfilm and Marvel Studios. But as the wheels keep coming off the bus, like they are right now with Marvel, like they have been with Star Wars in the last few years, the attention is going to get shifted, and we're starting to see that attention shift from corporate, from people like Chapek now, into like, okay, we're making a buttload of money with the sports programming, with ESPN and linear content and all this kind of stuff. The ad revenues are going back up, all this kind of stuff. Disney Plus, we're still not making money yet, but we've got another 2 or 3 years to get to that point to meet the goal, because their original goal with Disney Plus was to turn profitability after 4 or 5 years. And I think they're still on track to do that as long as they can get the content out. And they just don't have a lot of new content coming.
That's why that's a priority and an emergency. That's why the next year is going to be a no-nonsense Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni hitting the ground running, making things happen. But that also brings me to what I think is also going to happen next year, especially now with our new chairman coming in, right? Is I think Kevin Feige's done. I've said this for quite some time, and each bit of evidence keeps supporting that it's not working out for him. And the most recent thing we saw is the latest data that we have on Hawkeye is that is apparently it's 40% down from Loki. And I haven't watched Hawkeye yet, but I've left Disney Plus after Carano was fired. I'm considering returning after these events because I now believe that it's going to be put on the right track, and so I've got to put my money where my mouth is, and I believe that now. So I'll return, and I'm a big fan of some of the people involved in these things, and so I'm going to watch Hawkeye. And I hear it's a decent show. It's actually a decent show, and so. With that's just another nail. Nothing has worked out right for Kevin Feige in 6 months. Nothing.
Not since Endgame. Nothing since Endgame has worked out. No, I mean, Hawkeye's
bad press 6 months straight.
It's not just that it's 40% below the Loki levels.
Yeah.
It's that it's even lower than where they started out on Disney Plus. It's lower than WandaVision's premiere.
All right. So that's a horrible trend. I mean, that's a horrific trend.
WandaVision was
the trend they need.
Yeah, WandaVision was 1.6 million in the opening weekend.
Yeah.
Falcon and the Winter Soldier was 1.8. Loki was 2.5. And all these numbers are from Samba TV, folks.
Yeah.
So again, whether the Samba TV numbers are completely accurate or not really isn't what's important. It's the measurement of the trends. Yeah, It's the trends that they're picking up. So 1.6 to 1.8 to 2.5. And now with Hawkeye back to 1.5, 100,000 less. And in fact, I think Hawkeye's, I got to go back and look because I may have made a mistake in the previous video. That wasn't over the opening weekend. That was over the opening 5 days because I think Hawkeye opened on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So if that's true, that's even worse.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's really, and I think a lot of people have just been jaded. I mean, they know going in, it's like we're watching all of our classic Marvel characters get discarded. And how many people want to watch this? Like, I have not had an interest to watch Hawkeye, mainly because it's like I kind of know he's going to be a bit player in his own show as it goes on, kind of like Loki was, and he's going to get replaced by a female character. That's just where we're going. Yeah. And if the same thing's going to happen with Iron Man coming up in Black Panther 2 with Iron Heart, this Riri Williams character that had a completely failed comic book run 3-4 years ago, whatever it was. That's where they're going with that. I think Doctor Strange is probably going to get killed off in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse because they have the Death of Doctor Strange comic book series happening this year right now.
Okay, well,
and now they're undergoing 6 days a week for the next 6 weeks until Christmas of reshoots for Doctor Strange. I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen. I'm not saying I have any inside information. This is a gut feeling.
Well, that may have been the plan. I'm not so sure that's the plan now, especially the reshoots. Because that's what I'm saying. I think that at this point, especially with the new chair coming in, who's an investor directly from the investor class, I just think that Kevin Feige has not helped himself in the last 6 months with bad press and bad choices. I think nothing has worked out for him. And it's in many ways, it's worse than Kathleen Kennedy because he went at the king directly, tried to get his protege to sue him, and it blew up in his face. And you went at the king, you miss. I've said from that moment on, he's finished. And I think the only thing that could salvage him is some good news. And, and Spider-Man's going to do well, but that's not going to be something he can take credit for. It's going to be something that Sony's going to take credit for, even if it's part of MCU, because we're already seeing Amy Pascal is doing all the press for it. Amy Pascal from Sony is the one out there proclaiming that there's going to be more Tom Holland movies. It's not Feige saying it, right? Because it's essentially her movie, and Feige, is in the background of it, so he's not going to be able to take any credit for it.
Even technically, it's not even Amy Pascal. It's just that Tom Rothman is not the one to go jump out in the limelight, but Tom Rothman, I think, is the one that's probably more responsible for a lot of that stuff than even she is.
Well, Ms. Pascal does love the limelight, as we saw in Sony emails, and God bless her. I remain of the view, and it's becoming a less controversial view with time, but I think with the new chairman coming in, I remain of the view that Mr. Feige will have an announcement next year, perhaps in the first half of next year, saying Mr. Feige has all these wonderful new opportunities, so he's going to cut his contract short and he's negotiated an exit. I just I can't imagine him being there next year unless he's completely renounces everything that he has shown that he's committed to, and I just don't imagine that he's going to do that.
I think he could stick around. I mean, we don't know what his term of contract is. It's not like with Kathy where we knew, okay, she runs at a 3-year increment. We have no idea what Kevin's is. Yes, because when he was renewed in 2018, maybe 2019. I think it was the same. Yeah, I think it was the same year as Endgame or right before Endgame, his last contract renewal. There was nothing out there that suggested how long that contract ran. But that being said, it could be another situation to where, look, Kevin, we want to keep you here because you're a good figurehead. Everybody knows who you are. You have a lot of respect, but you're going to have to play ball. This shanking classic characters and all this kind of stuff can't stop. I do think part of the reason they're doing this is because Disney doesn't want to share the pot. They're already in legal battles with the estates of Stan Lee.
Yeah.
They're having legal entanglements with Steve Ditko's a crew. I think part of this is if we can take these characters and radically alter their appearance, that's all we need to assuage any legal entanglements down the road. To say like, well, okay, you had your Captain America with Steve Rogers. Well, our Captain America is Sam Wilson. He's a black guy. It's totally different. So you can't claim copyright over this. Same thing with Ironheart. Same thing now with female Hawkeye. Same thing with, just go down the list of what we're doing.
But you're left with zealous characters that you're claiming ownership over.
Well, that's the other side of the coin is that I think they're hopefully starting to realize that this strategy ain't panning out, because it's the old expression is, well, you can have part of something or you can have all of nothing,
which is where they are.
Take your pick. Yeah. They're moving towards all of nothing. Yeah. The way that they're going.
I got Riri Williams. Take that. You can't take her from me. Okay.
Yeah.
Keep that. Good for you.
Good luck with that.
I'll take Iron Man, go somewhere else.
Yeah, I don't know how this is going to pan out, but right now there just seems to be a minimal level of excitement, if you can even call it excitement, for Phase 4 of the MCU.
Regardless of whether Mr. Feige stays or not, I will remain of the opinion that he will leave. We'll see if I'm right. But regardless, it doesn't matter. Regardless, even if he stays on as a figurehead or he decides wholeheartedly to embrace wisdom from the new chair who's going to have a conversation with him, right? You know, and so this Marvel is going to get off the bad track. It has no choice. It has no choice. There is no choice except to start going back to not only better storytelling, but going back to the original characters that people care about. And they're going to have to settle that lawsuit with the Stanley estate. It's just business. It's just business. It's not ego right now.
They could make a deal and everybody would make a ton of money, because at the end of the day, it's like, look, they bought Marvel for the same reason they bought Star Wars. We need to sell stuff to boys. Yeah. That's why it was purchased. That was a stated reason. Disney was adored by little girls. The princesses, they had girls wrapped up. They didn't have boys wrapped up. Hell, even growing up, when I was 7 years old, I went to Disney for the first time. It was fun. And then after that, I was like, I don't care. I was a Warner Brothers kid. I was a Looney Tunes kid. I like Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny. Yeah. Disney didn't have anything that interested me. And over the years, Disney wisely made the recognition of that problem. They bought Marvel. They bought Star Wars. But then they immediately with Star Wars, instantly turned around and said, well, screw the guys. Yeah, let's denigrate Han Solo, denigrate Luke Skywalker, and put in, Rey Skywalker, Mary Sue, and it'll be great. Well, we all know how that worked out. And now they're doing the same thing. They didn't learn the lesson from Star Wars. Now they're applying it to Marvel, and we're watching that collapse after a great 10-year run. So something's going to have to give, and hopefully some of these changes as the years go on, as the money starts, it's like, we're not making the kind of money we were 5-6 years ago with these same properties. What's going on? Yeah,
and Sony is just, making us look like idiots, right? And in this world where these studio heads and these corporation boards, heads, these chairs are all competing with each other at that club, table to brag about their accomplishments, to have Sony come in and just smugly look at all these idiots doesn't make them feel good.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Well, Kamran, I appreciate you being here. I know it's been a long one tonight, but it's been a great one. And I think the audience is going to love the hell out of this. I hope they do. And make sure, folks, before you check out today, and we're going to leave a link below, that you go follow Kamran on his Patreon. He does a great Patreon. If you want to stay up to date with all this kind of stuff that we're talking about, this is usually where the conversations start once again over on Patreon. Make sure you sign up. Just so everybody understands, I am on Patreon. Please don't subscribe to me on Patreon. I don't do stuff. I'm there to follow Kamran and a few other people. I say that because I've actually had a few people like sign up, like this person signed up for $1 and $5. I'm like, I didn't even set up.
Take their money, say thank you. God bless you.
I know, and I do, but I feel bad because like, please don't sign up for me. Go sign up to Kamran. Take the money you're going to give me on Patreon, give it to Kamran.
Give him some money and give me some money, and we're all good.
Just watch my videos and share them out. I'll be a happy camper. So anyway, thank you, Kamran, so much. Good to see everybody. Hit that like button, that subscribe button, the notification bell. Share this sucker out and make sure you leave a comment before you leave. And as always, take care.